Yellowstone Season 2 wrapped up with 2 episodes that were jam-packed with action, yet at the same time made you want to give Rip a hug. Hey, it's Adison Haager here, and episode 9 of Yellowstone brought us one of Beth Dutton's most noteworthy scenes. You know which one I'm talking about. You know, when this happened.
Don't go. You'll miss all the fun.
Tate ended up being collateral damage with his father and grandfather's enemies, and in this episode, we actually have behind-the-scenes insight on the kidnapping scene itself. Something I bet you're gonna wanna go watch again after you hear what it is. We left episode 10 with not just the Beck brothers dying, but also Dan Jenkins.
I have a right to be here. I have a right.
And this got us thinking, is Dan Jenkins really a bad guy? Staff at tasteofcountry.com is where you can leave all things Yellowstone related, and I've included links to the full Dutton Rules podcast episode that covers the latest episode of Bass Reeves. Hey y'all, you're listening to the Dutton Rules Yellowstone podcast. We're trying this a third time, a little behind the curtain. Billy, our audio has gone in and out, so there's been a few times where poor Billy's talking and I'm just looking like, oh, hello? But We're here now. And we're going to talk Yellowstone episodes 9 and 10 and Bass Reeves, but let's get into the meat of episode 9 and 10 specifically. I know you were pumped to talk about 10, so give me a little summary.
Yeah, well, I will in just a moment. I mean, episode 9 and 10 were so good, but I'm going to start actually with a hot take.
Oh,
Yellowstone,
okay.
I'm a big fan of Yellowstone season 3 and season 4. Season 5, the jury's still out because the season hasn't wrapped up yet. But I will say that Yellowstone could have ended after season 2 and made me a happy man. And you can make a case that it should have ended after season 2.
But Billy, think about this. Season 4, you find out that you find Jamie's dad. Like, there's so many things that happened in season 4 that wouldn't have happened. I haven't seen season 3, so I can't speak to that whatsoever, but I can speak to 4, and I mean, that's pretty juicy.
There's a lot of nuggets still out there, but none of them were necessary. And the further the show kind of goes on from here, just the thread starts to unravel just a little bit with season 3, maybe a little more so with season 4, and then by season 5, we've talked about, as a lot of people have talked about. It's still a very good show, but not quite as solid as it was here in season 2. I mean, the way it ends with like the roller coaster of emotions, I mean, they take care of tiny little details, hundreds of them, in sort of just the quickest, most convenient, efficient ways. The writing is super sharp. The emotional is gut-punching at times. It is just so good right through the end. And then there's no loose ends to tie up with season 3 either. It like is a really clean ending at the end of season 2.
I really liked episode 9, if we want to dive in there, because I liked it. I feel like it gave me, I don't know, like a lot of perspective that I didn't know necessarily going into it. Like Jimmy, we find out that his granddad was killed by the men who Jimmy originally owed money to. I didn't even know Jimmy had a granddad, stuff like that where, and then the epic, Monica. No, I didn't.
You knew. Yes, you did. He was in, that's how Jimmy ends up at the ranch. Is the granddad talks to John.
Shoot, yeah,
and John
you're right.
hires him at the granddad's behest.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you're so right. That was dumb. I mean, that wasn't dumb. I just forgot.
You're like, stupid.
And then I said,
okay, Adison. There's a lot happening. Don't be so hard on yourself, Adison.
That's why I stopped. I was like, that wasn't very nice. It's just a TV show. Anyways.
But you're right. There was a lot that happened in episode 9, but it was really kind of a build up to this episode 10. And as you mentioned, Jimmy's grandfather is killed. That storyline kind of reaches a resolution when Rip decides to take care of the meth bros, as I've been calling them, and basically blows up their trailer. Jimmy gets his ranch and those guys get killed pretty efficiently, which was pretty neat.
Yeah.
We also find out that Jamie got some big news early on in episode 9. Do you recall what that was?
Got a baby on the way, got a bun in the oven. By Christina.
He did not get the safe sex talk. Apparently, the Dutton parents failed him in that regard.
Sex ed did not, the birds and the bees talk did not land with Jimmy.
He was shocked beyond belief that this could have possibly happened. But yeah, Christina has a baby coming, and she basically gives him an ultimatum, says, get your life together, separate from your family, or you don't get to be a part of this little boy's life.
Let's just talk about the big quote that she said in that episode. She said, "You're the devil, I know, and I'm stuck with you."
That actually happens a couple of times, I feel like, that, or a variation of that quote. But different people have said it maybe throughout the series, I'm recalling. But yeah, she gives him a pretty amazing ultimatum to sort of contend with. And I don't know. I mean, I know kind of what he decides, but it doesn't look as episode 10 rolls out that he's necessarily going to lean into being a father quite yet.
Unfortunately, because we saw season 4 is where we meet the baby. Yes. We meet the baby.
Yeah, season 4, we see the baby. Yeah.
So it wasn't like this moment wasn't a surprise. It was more so just for me of, oh, okay, so this is where it originated from. Obviously, I just never knew that scene. I will say, now this is a hot take, Billy. Jamie with a good old Stetson hat sitting down to talk to Christina. I like Farmer Jamie. Like his vibe.
He's not a farmer. He's a rancher, Adison.
Sorry. Actually,
not a straw hat.
I absolutely know. I just offended any single ranch owner, rancher, ranch hand. Like they're at the row. Please, no one throw Rotten Tomatoes at me. I really did not mean to do that. You're right. Jamie is
and you
not.
Call yourself an Aggie. I'm just saying.
Hey, I went there for journalism and telecommunications, okay? Not 4-H. But anyways, I like that version of him, or even earlier in the episode when Jimmy gets the news that his dad or his granddad had died, and Jamie's been working on the ranch for a little bit. Like, I like that version of him. It's just because I don't get to see it in season 4.
No, it's weird later when he puts on the hat. It's for like a formal occasion.
Yeah.
Nothing stranger than seeing people who don't usually wear cowboy hats suddenly put one on because they have to dress up real nice. It's like, if you don't do it on a daily basis, you shouldn't do it at the black tie affair either.
You know what? This has nothing necessarily to do with Yellowstone, but a fun little story I want to tell our listeners real quick, because that just reminded me of my favorite during CMA radio remotes. That's, for those who are listening, it's what happens 2 days before actual CMA awards. We do a bunch of radio stations, do interviews. But why I'm saying all this is because I love it when Cody Johnson's team walks in, because don't mess with Texas as they come in with all their hats. Like, they look like they genuinely stepped off the set of Yellowstone.
They do look like the Livestock Commission.
They do, yeah.
Yeah. But it's can I pivot to another scene that I've been kind of really eager to get your take on?
Oh, yeah. Let's do it.
The boutique scene.
Ooh, yeah.
Monica is getting accused of theft at a boutique. The owner wants to frisk her and is really, they really have the cops going at her pretty good. And then Beth comes in and saves the day in a pretty graphic way and literally dresses down the boutique owner, someone she knew from her past. Mm-hmm. How did that scene make you feel? Did you like that scene? Did you enjoy it? Where were you at on the range of emotions there?
I enjoyed it because it was fun watching Beth. We see this in season 4 where there's a few moments where Beth and Monica kind of interact truly as like sister-in-laws. But up until then, I hadn't seen that. So that was, now obviously we're working backwards, but I liked seeing this scene where it felt like, Beth is actually acting like a sister-in-law, like as if Monica is her sister, and really just standing up for Beth, because I feel like Beth doesn't really stand up or protect Monica a ton. And so seeing that scene, her being like, you know what, I'm going to come after you, ma'am. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And also I was like, that the store owner had it coming. The only thing that I was like, wait a minute, this doesn't like, and granted, Beth answered this when she was like, the policewoman said, this is a, not volunteered search. What's the what is the word I'm looking for?
Yeah, she volunteered for it, I think she said, or she consented.
Yeah, thank you. I was like, no, I actually think that, yeah, that's more in the lines. But as she was having Monica like take off her underwear and all the above, I literally was like, this is so ridiculous. Like, let's just pull a TSA, pat down at the airport. Like, that's when I was like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. They were just shaming her at that point. And no, I love that scene because Monica coming in hot and, Beth coming in hot. And then Monica where she's going, it's okay, Beth, let's just leave. And Beth is like, no.
Oh, hell no.
Yeah. No. I don't just walk away. No. Please hold my beer.
So that was a fairly iconic Yellowstone scene, I feel like.
Okay.
And season 2 has had quite a few of them. After that is when we cut to the scene where Rip and the boys take care of Jimmy's issues with the meth bros. And important to remember there is that Ryan commits to getting the brand during that sequence. He decides he's all in and he wants to get the brand at that point. So not all the cowboys are yet. Still, even after this season, there's still quite a few who are unbranded, even though they're pretty complicit in some of the criminal dealings with the show. But then it's a fast forward to the Dutton house and the Tate kidnapping scene, which I do have some like behind the scenes on this to share.
Oh, wait, how?
I know people, Adison. I mean, don't worry about it. I know things. I read things.
Let me sip my tea, okay?
Yeah, and I mean, so we didn't actually witness Tate get kidnapped, right? He goes out to feed the horse Lucky. He seems spooked at a certain point, and then he's just gone. And then all we see is the next morning when Casey finds his boot and the mud prints, and we realize he's been kidnapped.
Right.
They actually filmed a kidnapping scene, but cut it. So they had these kidnappers that were all dressed up in camouflage, and they filmed the whole violent scene, but it ended up getting cut from that episode of Yellowstone because I guess everybody just preferred the drama of letting you infer what happened and what kind of trouble he might be in.
Wait, how interesting. Oh my gosh, bummer for whoever was in that scene and that was your only scene on the season and you don't even make it in.
Yeah, probably. But I mean, they were like masked men. It was kind of like the guys who killed Dan Jenkins in episode 10. Like, you don't get a lot of on-screen love for that. They were like masked, camouflaged men. So
Billy,
they still got paid. You know,
I'm still going to tell you, I don't care if I would be fully masked or whatever, just to say I was on Yellowstone, I'm wearing that as a badge of honor. You don't even have to be able to see my face or I'm recognizable. Yeah. It could be just the back of my head. I'd be like, I was on Yellowstone.
Maybe they gave him a little courtesy part later on in the series and up in season 3 or something like that. They came
Bartender 5.
Yeah, like one of Taylor Sheridan's Cowboys or something. Yeah, one of those kind of roles.
Real quick, before we get any deeper, I just want to kind of give people a little bit of insight because if you're watching the video a little bit later, you might wonder, why is it different than if you go and listen to the audio? Billy and I are mixing things up a little bit when it comes to our YouTube videos. We're just going to be showing our Yellowstone recap and not our Bass Reeves recap. So if you want the full podcast episode, head to Spotify or Apple Podcast. And you can listen to the full thing there. It's just making it more snackable, That's right. The goal.
Yeah, and Yellowstone season 2 is wrapped up with here, so we won't have anything else to talk about. Next week will be probably just Bass Reeves centered, but the other reason for doing this is we're just kind of trying to find our audience on YouTube as well. We have a subscriber base on YouTube of 750,000 people, and they're pretty used to getting these 3 to 4 to maybe 6 minute long videos.
Right. And
we started dropping 45 minute long videos on them, and there just wasn't a response. It kind of affected some of the other videos on the channel in terms of how much reach they had.
Yeah.
So while there was a great audience watching on YouTube pretty faithfully, we decided that we could probably have all win. It might be a best case scenario if we just have a 20-minute-ish or so episode on YouTube and then the full thing for people who want it on the places that you just mentioned.
Yeah, we're learning, we're growing as the podcast grows, and always love y'all's feedback. staff@tasteofcountry.com. If you're loving this new form, we just started, so maybe give it a hot second. But this is a podcast for y'all, so we always listen, take feedback, thoughts. It's interactive, even though you guys physically aren't talking with us.
Yep. Episode 10.
Episode 10, Sins of the Father.
So good. So, I mean, give me your opinion on it. I mean, I'm raving about it, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. How do you rank season 2 and episode 9 and 10 amongst all the episodes you've seen?
Season 9, episode 9 I really liked. Episode 10 was great. I wouldn't hang it as like, oh, that's my number one. Actually, I think my number one was learning the origin of where Rip came from and his parents and all the above. I had no clue any of that. So that for me was kind of my Super Bowl trophy out of season 2. But I definitely like season 2 more than season 4, which is a lot to say. But I think the reason why I like season 2 so much is because there was a lot of like groundwork laid that obviously when I jumped in at season 4, I'm like, obviously this happened. Like how I'm viewing each character now obviously went through character development, but I just never saw that. So I've thoroughly enjoyed season 2 as just getting some answers for questions I didn't necessarily need answered, but it's kind of nice to have them.
That opening sequence with Chris Stapleton's Daddy Doesn't Pray, and we watch John Dutton, played by Josh Lucas, I think, say goodbye to his father in the mountain. That is maybe my favorite use of a song on Yellowstone in all the seasons. I mean, that is just such an effective scene because we learn so much. It's beautifully shot. Mm-hmm. It's emotional, and it's just the perfect song for that sequence.
I agree.
Gosh, that was so good. That was just a great way to open an episode that, we talked about this last week as well. There's these sweet, tender, heartfelt moments, and then it's just a 180 into the violence. So it's almost, you have to really kind of be careful when you start getting in your feels with Yellowstone because...
Yeah, because then you're going to end up at Dan Jenkins' house and, he gets shot dead. And it's a quick, like, you can't literally immediately. And so you can't stick in the tinder too long, or you're going to have a really hard time processing the next step, which I will say. So what happens is after that tender scene, intruders come into Dan Jenkins' home. Dan ends up getting shot. This is the part that I just didn't, I understood what he said, but I just don't fully get why he was saying this. As he's laying on the ground dying, he is essentially affirming himself, saying out loud, I have a right to be here. This is America. Is this like his conscience? He really feels guilty and he's trying to like reaffirm himself before he passes away?
Well, this was his battle cry for 2 seasons. Like he could not comprehend why people weren't more welcoming. He wasn't doing anything illegal. He was trying to be a businessman, and he truly wanted to show people the beauties of Montana. His heart was arguably in the right place. So like again and again, it was like this, why is this happening? I deserve to be here. I have every right to take this land legally as the next person. Why won't anybody let me live in peace? So he was just kind of, it was his battle cry, and that's how he went.
At some point, if there were people coming after me like that, I'd say it is not worth, the land is not worth it. But clearly,
how do you feel about Dan Jenkins? Is Dan Jenkins a good guy, a bad guy? Did you begin to have some sympathy for him as we got a little closer to the end of the season?
I didn't. Once again, coming in at season 4, I just knew of his name, knew kind of the history there. Now seeing it play out the way it did, I don't have as much disdain for him. I don't think he's as much of a true like villain, or I guess technically he is a villain in this season, but he's not a bad guy in the sense, to your point of, he's a businessman, man.
I would take that further and argue that he's the only good guy in this season.
Oh.
The Duttons and Malcolm Beck, and to a certain extent Thomas Rainwater. Maybe not so much Rainwater yet, but certainly the Duttons and Malcolm Beck. They're the bad guys. They're the ones doing mean, evil things. And Dan Jenkins, he does represent a morality. Like he never killed anyone outside of for self-defense. And like he tried to operate within the lines of the law as best he could for a long time, aside from beginning of season 1, I guess. But, it was just, you see a character like that because they're going up the Duttons and you think they're the bad guy, they're the antagonist.
But really not.
And those aren't synonyms, bad guy and antagonist. He is the antagonist, but he's not the bad guy. He's actually probably a pretty good guy. He's just a guy that you don't really like because you're cheering for the Dutton family and their way of life.
Right. No, I think that's a super interesting perspective. I want to poll this question for our listeners. Do y'all think that Dan Jenkins ended up being a bad guy? What are your thoughts? staff@tasteofcountry.com. Let us know. If you're watching this on YouTube, get that comment section going. Yeah. What are y'all thoughts?
I was sad to see Dan go. But I guess he did the character did sort of need to wrap. But this episode, just really from the start to the very end, the tension just builds and builds and builds, and that vice just grips tighter and tighter. Finally, we get a little relief when Casey gets into the Beck brothers' house. Sheriff Donnie Haskell ends up joining the Dutton cause, pulls his sheriff's back so that Casey can get in, and he confronts Teal Beck, ends up killing him on the bathroom and getting a little bit more information about where his son Tate is. And then it's down to the shootout with Malcolm Beck and his men, who end up being militia brothers, and the Dutton family.
Yeah. Well, thankfully, Tate was rescued, obviously.
So I have a little information on that as well that'll kind of blow your mind here in a second.
What is up with you in this? Like, Billy was actually an extra on the Yellowstone set, and we just didn't know it. I love it. I'm just confused. Not questioning it. I'm just baffled.
But first, the scene between Rip and Beth, when Beth reads Rip the letter from John, essentially saying that Rip is his son. He gives Rip that house, and then immediately asks Rip to be first into battle on a horse to draw fire. Like, that was...
I didn't think about that.
That was such that was like an epitome of Yellowstone type of scene, and maybe it even epitomizes the Rip and John Dutton relationship a little bit.
Yeah. I do think it was really sweet, though, when he essentially called him his son. I was like, oh, tender. So
Tears.
tender.
Rip was crying. Big Rip was crying.
Big Rip. BR.
That was a beautiful scene. I mean, it's just another reason why I like this episode, because it had that kind of heart in it as well before it got to the violence. And as you mentioned, they do go eventually. They have to go to one house and then another. At the first place, they confront Malcolm Beck, and John shoots Malcolm Beck, has a conversation as he lays dying. We never actually see Malcolm Beck die, which kind of fueled a lot of conspiracy theories about who attacked the Duttons at the end of season 3.
Yeah, I remember reading that.
But, and then they go to a second house and eventually find Tate in a bathtub, terrified, his head's shaven because he's been kidnapped by white militia and white supremacists, and they bring Tate home. But the trivia note to this is that scene where they rescued Tate wasn't filmed with the rest of season 2, like in that batch. They actually began filming season 3 and shot that scene and then put it on an episode that ended season 2. And the reason that this makes a difference is that if you look closely, you can tell that Tate in that bathtub scene has grown quite a few inches over little Tate from the rest of season 2.
Why did they do that? Did they just want to add it in at the end? Like, why?
I imagine maybe it had to do with just logistics. Maybe it had to do with maybe they ran out of shooting days for the cast. Maybe they didn't have the space for it or the location. I have a feeling it was probably a pretty boring technical reason. But they knew they had time as well because, like they did during 1883, they were filming in real time.
Gosh, yeah. It's been so with the writer's strike and stuff, I kind of forgot just how the taping of Yellowstone operated. I mean, we really haven't been in that zone for a hot second. Yeah,
and I think like any episode, any television series, they tape several weeks ahead of time, but they don't tape the whole season and then roll it out. So Yellowstone probably just operated like that.
Gotcha.
For a large extent, but yeah, a pretty emotional sequence there when Monica finds out and John Dutton has a good cry, and I mean, it's just all these big Dutton men are just everybody's weeping.
I liked episode 10 for that reason, that you just saw a little bit more. Billy's like, great, so Adison just I love all the crying scenes. No, the tender feelies, the warm and fuzzies, just I don't know. It's just nice seeing these men who are normally just very callous, just to emotion, maybe.
Are you the kind, like when there's someone in your family, a man in your family who's crying, you watch them, don't you? You kind of look and linger a stare.
What
like,
do you
oh my
mean
God,
by
look, he's
that?
crying. I've noticed, like sometimes when a man is crying, like the women around them will come close and give him extra attention and maybe even look or stare at him as he's having this emotional moment. When that's the last thing a guy who's not used to crying wants. He just wants to be left alone and for no one to see this. But it's such a rare sight, you can't help but look. It's like the Northern Lights or the Milky Way. You just kind of have to look, I guess. A car crash.
Well, no, I don't look. But funny that you say that. I don't think anyone in my family listened to this podcast. But there was a moment last year where my dad, who's not a crier, was crying over something, and my middle brother and I like went to just like kind of talk to him. And me, who's like, I'm an empath, I'm a fixer, I'm like, are you okay? Like, what's wrong? Like, let's get to the root of whatever's going on. And I just remember Max looking at me. That's my middle brother, and he goes, Adison, just let him cry. I was like, okay. I'm stepping away right about now. I'm just gonna let this happen. But yeah, I'm more of like, okay, like let's figure out like why are you crying? And no, I've quickly realized, yeah, it's one of those of like, no, that's not what's happening here. Just let me do my thing.
I have one other question about episode 10. Any final thoughts though about the finale or kind of where it's headed from here?
No, I enjoyed it. I didn't overthink it. I think so much of Yellowstone in the past, I've overthought of like, let me look into every potential Easter egg. And I genuinely, 9 and 10, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to sit back, relax, and enjoy. Just take it as it is. So
what happens in season 3 is we'll meet the company that takes over Dan Jenkins' Paradise Valley. And that'll effectively become John Dutton's new nemesis.
Classic.
He has to battle with. And fairly quickly we'll meet that group of people. And then the Beth and Rip love story will kind of continue to develop in some really kind of sweet and personal ways. Jamie ends up finding his way back into politics. Mm-hmm. Casey and Monica keep on Casey and Monica-ing from there. It doesn't look like season 3 is going to come on CBS as far as I can tell. So,
oh, really?
Well, I haven't seen an announcement of it. Now, I could be mistaken, and maybe they'll surprise us here after the holidays. But, no announcement that that's going to be the case, which is surprising to me because you would think they would need the programming.